Okay, so as I continue into the shadows, I'm going to bring the shadows into this side over here, which has warm light on it coming from the other side. Okay, so it's warmer but slightly darker than the color over here. Okay, that feels about right. And there's a little transition color there I'll have to deal with.
Like that.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna work across this side. I think I'll work on the slightly darker value first. So let's see, that shape goes like that.
Okay. Like that.
Other shape falls across, something like that, I guess. Something in there. Okay, kind of rolls along like that. And moments like this, it's kind of when the transparency of acrylics are either really great and super fun and you'll love it, or a little annoying.
See, and I guess I haven't decided yet which it is. A little bit, I guess.
Okay, something like that. A little bit more light up in there. And this is all that slightly lighter, warmer thing going on. Cooler, grayer. Seems I'm just nudging this up until then. I was just nudging this color forward a little tiny bit at a time, but that was kind of a leap. And now the value is wrong. The color's kind of cool. It's a little too chromatic and a little too dark. And a little too pink. Okay. Yeah, still too pink. Okay, so we'll see how this goes. about hard and soft transitions. So some of these transitions should be a little bit softer, which they might be, in all honesty, once the paint dries. And others need to be just a little bit cleaner. So we'll see what happens. It's really not that. It's not that big deal. Certainly not right now, but it's one of the last like really unresolved shadowy things that we had going on. Then there is the teapot, which is a cooler gray, and you can see I'm just adding to the mess on the palette. So it's going to be green. So naturally, I want to grab magenta because magenta is the anti-green. So since I'm making a shade of green, yeah, nice. Okay, so that kind of weird, ugly tone, and it's weird, but red is it's just on the other end of green, so it's not that big a reach to get there. I mean, it's just across the color wheel to green. Yeah, okay. So I'll be fine-tuning some of that, but looking at the transition, those transition colors. I think that could get a little bit darker, maybe. Something else. Yeah, okay, something like that. Ooh, not like that. Maybe it is a little like that. Not bad, kind of weird.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna have to mix up some of those darks again, and that's good, right? So one of the things that's a really good thing is when you go too far with a color. Okay, I want to get rid of this light that's in here. I'll never be able to make it dark if there's white in the brush. So if you go too far with a color, or you paint over a color that you need, that's not a reason to be frustrated. It's a reason to get kind of excited, because it's an opportunity to come up with a yet better and more interesting color. Look at how interesting that color is. Yeah, okay. We know there's that sort of weird red transition into the orange down there. A little bit of that. A little bit of that. Oh yeah, okay. Big fun. Yeah. Okay. Don't want this to sound like I'm having too much fun, but it is lots of fun. Okay. All right, and so I'm looking at transitions through there. They're not quite up to being half light. They're just transition colors. And they've got temperature shifts toward warmth.
Okay, right now it's gonna.
So each time you have to remix a color, is great. It's just great news. You don't want to make up too much of any color. Don't try to make puddles of color. It'll look weird. And you know, and they're not there. I mean, there just aren't. Those colors don't exist. There are no flat colors that are going to fix everything. The colors are more interesting and weird than that. And, you know, and weird is good. Okay, I think that's some of the weird that's going on in there. We know we're going to have to sneak up on this a little bit more. It's not there yet. So let's get some. So if there's any blue or purple or green over there, of course it'll destroy the yellow and orange. So grays, not so much, not really a big deal, but we definitely don't want any purple or green in there. Yep, not those colors. So you don't have to re-clean your entire palette, just the parts that go wrong. So if there's blue in the yellow, you want to fix that. All my recycled watercolor paper towels over there. Okay, so let's add another layer to the orange before we're all done in the shadows. All right, so let's take a look at these orange tones. There's a blue-white light coming from over here. We haven't started painting that light yet. So we know we want a very light tone. And look at how intense we want to make that. Say somewhere in there. Yeah, okay. And then it fades. It is surrounded by a lighter value on this side, but more chromatic. There we go, like that.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, better. So if I want to match that value, but I'm going to reduce the energy, I just throw a little green in it. Make it a little bit darker. Okay, so I can make things more chromatic, less chromatic. And that weird gray that's underneath it kind of makes it interesting, in my opinion. That's kind of cool. And then as it moves up toward the light, it's more chromatic. Still a tone, but a lighter tone. There we go. don't know what I'm going to do with that yet, but something. When it gets over here, it's got shaded gray mixed into it, because blue plus orange equals gray. And the light over here is blue. So I'm just doing the math in my head. Blue light on an orange. It's up toward the top, it's a little lighter, and maybe more chromatic.
That's the same sec. Yeah, okay, I think that's right.
Right, I don't want to take blue over there into orange territory. Okay, something like that. And okay, is there anything else I can do with this brush? See, there's something kind of like that going on here. Yep, that's a big leap. I'm not sure I'm right. I could be terrified. Yep, I'm definitely wrong. Okay. Oh, but that's kind of cool. All right. So there is something like that, but it's, now that I see the color, it's just back there. Yeah, I'm gonna paint right through that edge a little bit. I've got to put the light side of the orange in, so I've got room to do that. And then I think this is similar. Yeah, okay. Still a shadow. It's very weird. It's strange because there are two light sources, the window and the classroom spotlight. The classroom spotlight is a little bit orange, and depending on the time of day and the day, the window can be very blue. Something like that. Okay, it's not terrible. I don't know what the other side's going to look like yet, but something like that. Okay, you know, and since we're talking about doing this anyway, let's show you how to do another glaze. So if I want to do a blend into that, put a little bit of glaze down. Now, drop of water. So it doesn't dry too fast on me. Okay, and then I can blend this on the top side and this more orange on the bottom side, and this just a little bit more red inside. And then I can just, and I can blend them into the medium instead of into each other. Ta-da. And we'll see how that dries. Could be crap, but. Okay, so now I'm gonna start thinking about colors on the light side. So I can move from these colors into the light side. All I need is more of the light, more of the colors of the light. Let me see what I can do with this color that's on my brush. The light on the top of the tablecloth is yellower, particularly down in here. Yeah, okay. A little lighter. Okay, something like that. And I'm gonna, since I'm underpainting this and starting to make that move, okay, I don't need to worry about the top right now. Here someplace. And then I'm going to transition into this.
I don't know what that is, but it's got one.
Okay. Dribbled water on things and made other mistakes, but that's a start. Okay, so I'm going to take that color. So the light has yellow in it. So it's not just a different value of green. I'm not just adding white to the green. I'm adding yellow and a smidge of orange to the green to describe what's going on over here. Which isn't flat, right? But this is kind of the, I think this is the fun part. This is when you get to start painting the light in. So all of that setting up, all that hard work that you did with the shadows was so you could have this kind of fun. And as things get farther from the light, so over on this side, it's farther from the light, so it's not going to be as bright.
Okay.
So we get some in-between colors to think about there. Let's see what else we've got. Well, we've got this weird color on the palette, okay, on my brush. Okay, so we've got the green of this apple over here. We don't want to make a big deal out of it, but it is green apple, but it's got blue light shining on it, and it's on the, and it's not a very important shape, right? It's dangling half off the page. So I don't want to give it too much attention or energy, but see how that actually makes it go away on that side? By doing that, it now matches the value of the far side, which makes it like now I can only really see this side, which is good. It's a good thing. All right, so I'm going to let that set up for a minute. I'm going to scrub into that, clean these brushes. Okay. All right, I was cleaning up the bottle a little bit and looking at some of the shapes that are over here, making sure the edge is clean. I've got to make up a new color string of orange, and I mean, there's some other things, but I think I'm going to work on the reflected light over on the blue side for a few minutes, because the reflected light needs to be dimmer in the reflected light is always dimmer than the direct light. Just kind of a thing. Can still be pretty bright. It's not no brighter than the light on the light side. The reflected light is always dimmer than the light. I'm just going to use the handle of one of these brushes to make a straight edge, because I can't rest my hand on the paint until it dries, and I'm just not that patient. And it's really tempting, I mean, it's always really tempting to make the highlights and light brighter than they really are. I mean, it's very, very tempting to do that, but they really aren't that bright. But they aren't that dark. Okay, and the nice thing about paint is it's just paint. So if something goes south, so in this case, while I was looking over there, I drug my brush through the wrong color. But if something goes a little bit south, there we go, okay. It's easy to fix with more paint. And you know, everything should be so easy to fix. So since it's a blue sky reflecting, it's going to be a blue highlight. In this case, a blue highlight that is reflecting from the window with its different bars and the stuff that's going on in the window. And the color of the highlight on the cool side of the orange is going to contain a little bit of orange. All right, so I don't need that to get any more exciting than it is. Like I said, it's not the star of the show. And in fact, what I'm going to do is use those colors while they're on my palette. And before I clean this up, I need to clean this up in order to do the bright light colors. All this schmutz that's on here is going to make it really difficult to get to the colors I want to get. Making an intense yellow-orange, just making all the colors that I want. Okay, that's close. It's going to dry a little bit darker though, so knowing that. Oh, right. And there were highlights down in here as well. Okay, and then down the side of the bottle, that highlight that I tried to draw just a second ago, you can see it has faded away. So I'll try again. It's a little bolder at the top. And the, and the little bit of variety here and there of just what's, what's wonky is good, right? That weirdness is part of what makes the paint feel more correct. If it was perfect, then it wouldn't look right, oddly. Okay, so I'm gonna try to get the reflected light on the teapot. And then there are kind of some really strange colors in through here. And with everything, with acrylics, they dry darker, so you just have to keep an eye on it while they're drying and see if you're getting what you actually want. Like this keeps drying darker every time I hit it, and it looks like it's way too light. Dries a little too dark. So kind of the only way to do this is keep playing with it. Okay, I don't really need to go any darker than that or any lighter than that. There's this little bit of light on here, also coming from this cool side. All right, I'm gonna leave that alone. It is a tiny bit frustrating, I know, that the colors change as the acrylics dry. It is just one of the characteristics of the medium.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to let this dry. There's some pretty thick paint on it at this point, and some of the paint that I'm working over is wet. I mean, I can't touch the surface. So I'm going to let this dry. I'll let the video, I'll see if I can't get all of that downloaded so that I can get it to you guys soon. All right? And then tomorrow I'll be able to see it. I'll have a little better light as well, and I won't be quite as tired. Okay, so I hope that was interesting for you, and that you're having fun with your paintings tonight. Talk to you later. Bye. Just a quick video to remind you how easy it is to clean your paint up. This was the messy palette from mixing a bunch of tones and shades, and all I did was spray a little water on it about 3 minutes ago, let it sit, and the paint just comes up. So this was painting last night. It's been sitting out all night long, just exposed to the air. Because it's these golden opens, the magenta is still wet and open and could be used, but it's the only thing on the palette that is, and I needed a clean palette. So it's that easy to clean up. I'm not pushing down hard at all. I'm just using my palette knife, running it over the surface. Okay, and then just take any paper towel. I use dirty paper towels, something that I've already used for painting. So just look around for kind of a trashed paper towel somewhere in the studio. And use that mainly to kind of get all the chunks of paint out. Throw those in the trash. The paint will dry while it's in the trash. Just a reminder, it is illegal to throw away wet paint in California, or to put wet paint down your drain. So you wouldn't want to wash this in the sink because there's wet paint, right? So you don't want to put the wet paint in chunks down your drain. Plus, it'll stain your porcelain. Eventually, it will even stain this butcher tray. Okay, so that's the easiest way to clean this up. It's just like that. Then take a reasonably clean paper towel, wipe it out the rest of the way, and you're ready for a fresh beginning. Okay, so I'm moving from the shadows on this, from shadows and tones, toward half light, center lights, highlights, and fine-tuning things, right? And you can see everything's a little on the dark side. There's raw gesso showing through. Some of the transitions are starting to be taken on. This is going to get lighter. So every place where there's actually light falling, I've only begun to suggest it. I'm moving in that direction. Things can get brighter and lighter, but I've established form. And with all that gray and all of those shades, everything on the palette, I can't possibly make the kinds of intense colors that I need to finish the painting, in the same way that if I've got a lot of white or bright colors floating through it, I can't make the shades. So the reason to clean the palette up has nothing to do with messing up the paints, although by then I had burned through most of the paint on my palette, so everything was either used up or polluted. That's a good time to move on. Those polluted colors are fine for making shades, because really all shades is polluted colors, right? A little bit of cross palette mixing, instant shades, but not very useful for getting where I needed to go to finish the painting. And once I've got all the tints worked out, which doesn't take very much, right? I mean, I can work out tints for most of the palette without taking up a ton of space. So I'll still have some room to work on fine-tuning shades and fine-tuning some of the darker colors. Okay? Right now I'm going to clean up some paint I just spilled, and then we'll get back to the demo. Okay. Took a minute, set up my palette, so now I've got a full range of chroma, all the intense colors that are going to allow me to paint the lights. It helps me to see where we are. So these are, in fact, good tones. So these are grayed down as they should be. Every color in the shadows is going to be less intense than the colors in the light. Light is required to kind of activate and energize colors. The colors that are going on over on this side have just a note of orange, right? There's kind of a yellow, a warmth that runs through these. On the cool side, things are, in the shadow side, things are a little cooler, a lot darker, a lot more neutral, right? So there should be a lot of dark and neutral colors, lots of tones and shades on the shadow side, an interesting variety of colors. And the basic idea is there's a bottle, teacup, a globe in the shadows in the background, a block, and an orange sitting on a tablecloth. So the basic forms are there, and then there's some kind of shape back behind there. I think it's a pomegranate or red onion or something. It's back there, and there's just a sliver of a green apple on top of that bottle. So the observation was that there's this green, the kind of cool violet gray that runs through things that seems to show up in a number of places, just really muted purple tones somewhere in here if I was to attach a hue to it, and then a lot of orange. So it's kind of a triad. Instead of being a triad with yellow, magenta, and cyan, it's a triad with orange, green, and violet in it. So we're getting that kind of feeling from it, and that's a nice color harmony that always works pretty nicely. So pulling from this area somewhere in there and in here without being, you know, too rigorous about it, but not a lot of primary color. So I won't be pushing this toward yellow. This feels more like a red violet or a brown. So not trying to push straight up blues or yellow or red into this conversation. Okay, so I'm kind of playing with that harmony and just letting it be that. So the things that I need to make the tints that are going to feel like the color of the light in that room contains just a little bit of kind of a pink, kind of a pinky orange note. So the color of the light, that's the old-fashioned spotlights in that classroom, that's about the color of the light, is something like that. So that color is going to mix into things. So that's kind of a very light tint of orange. So if we were looking directly into light, we'd be seeing something like that. So on things like this, which is a light colored block, I think an ivory colored block with light shining directly on it, we're going to see something pretty close to that color in there, but I'm going to gray it just a tiny bit, because nothing is purely the color of the light. Even the highlights are not purely the color of the light. So I'm looking at a close value, similar value, right, but grayed down. So that would make a good first pass on there. And then the color isn't consistent all the way across. It's a little bit darker at the top, a little bit less intense. So something about in there, okay? So whenever you're not sure what to paint something, you're not sure where the color is, or even maybe even particularly if you are really certain, be suspicious of your own instincts. You know, question yourself. Ask if that's really what you want to do. So I'm looking at this top. See, it's much lighter than any of the colors that are on there. And it really activates the surface, right? I think I'm going to grab a brush that's more compatible with that kind of a shape. This angled shader. And I'm not worried about the top of the form. And I think that this block is just a little too wide. So these are the kind of things that, like at any level, you can fix, but it's actually easier to fix with the light, especially since we're painting in layers. It's easier to fix with the light than it is with the shadows, because white is the most opaque color on your palette. Okay. All right, so I've got that kind of warm gray up there. This as it falls back in space. It's more gray as it comes forward in space. It picks up a little bit more chroma, because things do tend to pick up a little more chroma as they move forward in space. The lower edge of this, for the most part, is kind of a lost shape. It kind of disappears, and it gets more yellow. So it becomes more chromatic as it gets right down to the bottom. And this near edge is lighter and more intense. Okay, something like that. As it moves away in space, less chromatic and a little less intense. It looks like there might be a little bit of a cast shadow. I'm going to have to look at the photo again. It's And since I blew the thumbnail up quite a bit, I've got a pretty fuzzy photo that I'm working from. And since I want this to be a really intense color, I may have to hit it twice in order to get the intensity I want out of it. So now I'm looking at the tablecloth. The tablecloth is just a little bit darker. I think there is a shadow back there. Again, I'm looking at a really low resolution thumbnail. I like trying to paint without my glasses on. And that mixing up, mixing down exercise, what you'll find is as things get a little darker, that you're mixing down. So as things move toward the light, they pick up a little bit of yellow. But you can see if I don't throw just a tiny bit of red in with that gray, it feels greenish. The yellow, when I mix yellow with gray, it feels a little green. But if I throw just a little bit of red into the mix, color feels oddly more accurate. Okay, and that's going to continue to get more neutral and a tiny bit redder as it moves away.
That.
Can't tell if there's much of a cast shadow, but let's assume since it's a light source. We've got multiple light sources in this painting. That's one of the reasons why I didn't give it to you, to the class. It's a kind of a weird image.
Let's go with that.
A little closer.
Okay, better.
Really dry in the studio today. Okay, and then as it gets over here, it mixes with the color of the sky. So it becomes a little bit more neutral, a little bit more gray. But unlike with paint, when you mix complementary colors of light together, you actually get a lighter color. With paint, you mix complementary colors together and you get a darker color. So when you start seeing different colors of light on your painting, it's an opportunity to try something new and different. Always a good thing. Okay, so that feels about right. We'll see about that shadow in that corner. I'm not sure what's going on back there or whether it matters. But something to look at. Okay, so I've got this temperature of light now starting to run through the painting. As I said, I'm going to keep the tools really clean, along with keeping your brushes, or starting with your brushes a little bit damp. I'm going to clean the brushes up, so if you do have them standing in something, only have them standing about an inch of water. You don't want the paint to ever get up deeper than somewhere in the ferrule. You don't want the handle to be underwater. It'll destroy the brush pretty quickly. It's not even a slow death. It's a pretty quick demise for your paintbrushes. You can wreck them in a weekend. All right, so while that sets up, what would be a good thing to do? I'm going to wait and see where this goes. So squinting over there. So this back wall, it's going to be cooler, so that's another temperature. I guess we'll take on the green and the orange. We've got orange on the palette. Let's go with orange. Grab a. So this is a synthetic filbert. I think this is one of the brushes that was on the materials list. It's a really good go-to for smaller canvases. Not an inexpensive, not an expensive brush. And so just for reference, want to see where the colors are that I've got on here. So because they're very neutral, even if I mix something that's the same value roughly, although we know the acrylics are going to shift in value, it's a lot more energetic. And that little bit of white that's in it, to keep that from feeling cool, throwing just a tiny bit of yellow into the color. And also because that's what's going on in the painting. The color is both lighter and warmer. Okay, and somewhere the highlight's going to be somewhere around there. Okay, and this transition goes there, there, there. Okay, so let's get back to the orange. And we know because the intense colors on our palette are pretty transparent, we know that anytime we get into a little richer color, a more intense chromatic color, we know it's going to be transparent or translucent at best, which means that the underpainting is going to show through. So we want to be pretty careful about our edge management. And you can see I'm not trying to mix up a color. I'm mixing through several colors here. And to compensate for that transparency, I'm going to put just a little bit of white into the mixture here so I can get that edge adjusted. I'll come back over that. I'm going to let that set up first. That edge isn't quite right. And you can see I'm not trying to make up a ton of paint. Again, I'm just trying to make up one brush stroke at a time. I don't think I like the placement of that quite. It's not quite what I wanted, but a couple of moving parts here. The intensity of the color that I'm trying to move forward, I'm trying to make it more chromatic, and the value of the color so I can shape this. And let's see, and I'm trying to, so we're trying to create a dimple, but not a really dark form in there. It's really tempting to let things get too dark, to see it as black and white instead of the subtle colors. I'm really susceptible to that. Make it a little too graphic. But when I don't, when I put a little thought into it and do my best work, it rewards me. And that's one of the things that you do is, over time, you get so you know the kind of things you're tempted by. I'm tempted to get very graphic with my paint colors. You probably have other temptations. So I'm blending wet on wet. And like I said, the light side of painting an object is, you know, frequently very easy. There aren't quite as many moving parts. Shadows, there are a lot of weird things going on in the shadows. And mixing neutral colors with subtle color casts, and one of the reasons to start there is because it's just hard. And once you've got that, I mean, once you've done the really hard work of looking and studying and figuring that out, everything else feels like a reward. Everything else is easier after that. It's the hard part. This is, I mean, obviously I'm using Skittles colors and it's really fun and bright. So everything's really fun to paint. So finishing a painting is moving into these mixing up, mixing down. It's bright colors and it's really fun. But if I started the painting here, I wouldn't have ended up here. I would end up someplace else. Probably someplace less cool. The hard work is worth it, to me. Just for that. Okay, so I know this area in here is a little transparent, so I'll have to hit that harder, but all of a sudden that feels like a color, right? There's like, boom. So that's going on. And in fact, the fact that it's going to only get brighter is going to be fun. And then now the hard work that I did last night, getting things to this point, they start to make more sense, I hope. And now when I look at the grayed down oranges in this reflected light, knowing that they're translucent and that as I mix them, they're going to be transparent. So as they fade down into the shadows down in here, and there's something about dragging the paint across the surface like that that feels a bit like light to me. And having a couple of different ways to apply the paint, so it's not all just one process. It's not just one way to do this. There are a bunch of ways to do this. And being able to warm the paint up just a little tiny bit. I mean, and that's, you can be as bold as you like. The important thing is getting the color right. So you want big bold marks, that's cool. But this is now darker and more neutral. This is brighter, it's moving forward. There's room as that dries and becomes transparent. There's room for that to kind of settle down a little bit. I can look at this shape back here and I think there is a shadow. So let's go ahead and make it big enough that I can see it. If I can't see it, well then the viewer's not going to get it. So in fact, it'll look like a mistake. But if I put it in there large enough that I can see it, it'll look intentional. And that's kind of the point. And it's like making something crooked. If you're going to make it just a little bit crooked, it'll look like you just screwed up. So if you're going to do it, do it. And the upper part of that is a little warmer. One of the reasons to like this brush, it just has some interesting qualities to it. it can hold a really sharp edge. It's synthetic. I'm aware that my hat gets in the way of the video sometimes, so. The only thing more than distracting than that would be if I didn't have my hat on and the glare off the top of my head would be blinding people, so. Okay, looking at that, which kind of makes sense with this, so I can clean up that edge.
Something going on back in there.
And you see that, like, once you kind of figure out the language of get the colors right, all kinds of cool things going on. All right, I think some of that's also what drags down into these, catches the light. Just warms that up a little bit. Oh, and there's a really interesting shape down here I left out painting. That I was looking at it last night. This shape kind of is important. It's a slightly more chromatic color that falls along that edge. A little more orange. That I couldn't get to last night because of all of the grays that had crept into the painting by then. Okay, all right, I think that's kind of making a little more sense to me now. So as some of these shapes, as they come forward, they catch the light differently. Not that it's not a big part of the painting, but I guess if I've devoted a sixth, fifth of the canvas to this piece of drapery, either I goofed or I need to make it work. All right, I'm going to clean up for the next color and let these surfaces set up before I do any damage.